What's up guys, Vress here with the latest episode in the series where we look at upcoming MMOs and try to work out whether they're worth getting excited about. Today we're going to be covering Lost Ark, a game that combines the cinematics and combat of an action RPG with the exploration and social features of an MMO. And for once, it actually looks to be doing a good job of it. The most frustrating thing about Lost Ark right now is the fact that we don't even have a 100% confirmation that it's coming to the West at all. The game's been in development for coming up on 8 years now, and we're currently waiting on its third phase of closed beta testing in the East. And of course that's pronounced beta if you're an American, I have been reading the comments. Anyway, as far as a Western release is concerned, the studio have expressed an interest in bringing the game our way. But as we all know, the reality is that it will likely depend on its success in the East. I think the game looks really promising and I think it will succeed, so I'm making this video based on the assumption that we will see it one day. Anyway, let's take a look at the game world. So unlike most MMORPGs, Lost Ark features a fixed camera, much like the one that we're all familiar with from the Diablo RPG series. Of course, this doesn't make it entirely unique, but it does differentiate it from the majority of popular MMO titles that are currently on the market. Personally, I'm not entirely sold on the whole fixed camera thing in an MMO, as I don't like the idea of not being able to look out across the zone and see what's out there. Being able to actually take in the view is an important element of feeling like you're in part of a wider fantasy world, at least in my opinion. Otherwise, it kind of just feels like a set of levels. However, that's just my personal bias, and a much bigger part of me is looking forward to trying something different, and you're going to see the benefits of having a fixed camera in this video. To be honest, the far bigger worry for me was the fact that this RPG style camera probably meant that it wasn't really going to be an MMO at all, just an RPG with a few MMO style features thrown into the mix. However, I was very happy to discover that I was totally wrong about that. The game actually features a large, expansive world in which you'll encounter and interact with other players on a regular basis, just as you'd expect from any MMO. There's going to be a big focus on exploration, rather than just having a typical mix of solo and co-op instances that you encounter in your typical RPG. It actually looks like you're going to be able to traverse the world in some really cool ways as well. This ranges from the almost platformer style action that's essentially enabled by the fixed camera, all the way to sailing the seas and exploring new islands in your own ship. The way you move around is point and click, which isn't something I'm massively keen on in an MMO, but again, it's just a matter of preference and I'm looking forward to a change of pace, to be honest. To me, it definitely feels like it's going to be worth the trade-off to experience this level of action in the way that you traverse the world. You can see from the footage here that the way you move around the world feels a lot more adventurous than what you typically get in an MMO. And when we check out dungeons later in the video, you're going to see how it can get really cinematic and actually incredibly cool. The graphics themselves aren't exactly top end, but they still look pretty great, and it feels like they work very nicely given the format. You just don't need the same level of detail when you're viewing the world through this angle. The different areas of the world are nicely varied in theme, and the different enemies you encounter seem to be unique rather than just being a load of reskins like we see in many other titles. I feel like the game has the level of detail and polish that can provide an immersive fantasy world for us. And in my opinion, that's far better than ultra high-end graphics in a dull, lifeless and unpolished world. The zones are instanced, which isn't my preference, but it's also not a big deal either. It's already been proven that this can work well and be popular in games like Guild Wars 2. All it means really is that we'll just get a few more loading screens than we might ideally like to see. In terms of story, we have the typical world in peril type thing going on. What's essentially happened is that the Chaos Gates have been opened and all kinds of bad demons are pouring forth into the realm and causing general mayhem. Legends speak of an ark that can be used to defeat these demons, but as the title suggests, unfortunately the ark is, well, lost. But jokes aside, it feels like a pretty classic RPG storyline that we can get behind and enjoy. What it really comes down to is the way in which the story is told, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to decipher that unless you speak Korean. Let's just hope we get a decent translation if and when this title launches in the West. A big selling point for Lost Ark is going to be the combat. The game actually looks like it's managed to combine action combat with something that still has the potential for tactical and meaningful fights. This seems to be extremely difficult to accomplish in your typical third-person MMO. But oddly, I think it's actually been enabled by the format that they've chosen for Lost Ark. I'm struggling to describe it in any other way than saying, just look at how this battle is unfolding. The players are able to enjoy the fluidity of aimed action combat, but at the same time they're having to put thought into perfectly executed combos and crowd controlling the enemies. Interestingly, this seems to be working even with an almost Zerg-like number of enemies, which typically turns the game into an unstructured hack and slash mayhem. The spell effects themselves do look pretty awesome, but they're probably a little overwhelming in large scale fights, so hopefully we'll see an option to tone that down a bit. The skill system behind this combat allows you to have 8 active abilities on your bar at any one time, and that's not including dodges and certain utilities. The intention is that you'll need to swap these abilities in and out in order to deal with different situations, which I really hope ends up being the case, as I love having to work your rotation around specific encounters. There's also an additional level of depth added by the tripod system that essentially provides you with 3 additional tiers of customization for each of your abilities. If you just step back and think about that from a mathematical perspective, then you're going to have a huge amount of different build options available. Of course, combat is going to vary greatly depending on which class you decide to play, and in Lost Ark you have a choice of 18 classes that fall into 6 different categories. We don't have details for every single class at this point, but let's take a look at the ones that we do have. The first category is Warrior, which consists of the Berserker, the Destroyer and the Warlord. The Berserker is pretty much exactly what you expect. They wield an enormous 2-handed weapon and deal large amounts of cleave damage. Then we have the Destroyer, who sports this massively over-the-top looking hammer, again dishing out serious cleave damage and smashing the enemy into tiny little pieces. And finally, in the Warrior category, we have the Warlord, a tank or DPS class with high armor and a focus on control mechanics. In the Mage category, we have the Arcana, a ranged DPS with really fun looking combat that's based on magical cards that have a chance of providing all kinds of different effects. We have the Summoner, another ranged DPS who can summon creatures to assist her in battle. And then we have the Bard, a ranged DPS or healer who's able to support their allies with a number of different buffs and will probably for that reason be very popular in raids. Under the Fighter category, we have the Battle Master, a melee DPS class who utilises their agility to get up close and personal and dish out deadly combos using fist weapons. We also have the Infighter, another melee DPS class that also utilises fist weapons, but this time focuses on slower and more powerful attacks. And finally, in the Fighter category, we have the Force Master, whose details we haven't yet been given. Moving on to the Gunner category, we firstly have the Devil Hunter, a ranged DPS who utilises pistols, shotguns or rifles, depending on which stance is most appropriate for the situation. Then we have the Blaster, who can stand back and dish out enormous damage from their powerful blaster rifle. The third class in the Gunner category is the Hawkeye, but we're still waiting on the detail for this one. There are also 2 further categories that we don't have any information on yet. These are Assassins and Specialists. Assassin classes include the Shaman King, the Pirate and the Shadow, and Specialist classes include the Astrologer, the Musician and the Alchemist. As you can see, there's going to be a huge amount of choice, but luckily the game features a training ground where you can test classes out and see which one works best for your playstyle. So let's talk a little bit about dungeons in the game, as from what I've seen so far they do look pretty awesome. I mentioned earlier how the camera choice allows for a very cinematic dungeon experience, and hopefully you're getting an idea of what I mean with this footage. The fact that the enemy is actually chasing you through the encounter, smashing through and altering the layout of the dungeon as you go adds a sense of urgency and adventure that you don't typically see in a static dungeon. It's not just dungeons that we're going to see either, raids are going to be a big part of the PvE experience in Lost Ark. And hopefully we're going to see a real focus on teamwork and some challenging boss mechanics. We have the standard raids that we're all used to by now, as well as some special Guardian raids where you work against the clock to take down a powerful enemy. When you spawn into a Guardian raid, the monster may be some distance away, and part of the challenge will be tracking it down in time to defeat it and beat the timer. As you'd expect, raid and dungeon content will provide you with some of the more powerful rewards in the game. It's not just about PvE though, and the game does feature a PvP arena known as the Colosseum. This is going to allow you to take part in 1v1 and 3 vs 3 battles. Presumably, matchmaking is going to be based on some form of rating system in order to make things competitive. I very much doubt that this will be all that we see either, as I imagine Battlegrounds would be another obvious feature to add to the game. To be honest, right now I don't have a great deal of information on it, but I'll keep you posted. There are also many other features. In fact, this may be one of the most feature-rich MMOs we've ever seen, and that's probably a big part of the reason that it's been in development for so long. You have island exploration features, stacks of different life skills, mini-games, card collections, and plenty more that we won't go into in this brief overview video. The number of features they're adding does feel a little excessive, and I hope that feature creep isn't going to strangle this game before it even comes out. But in fairness, it does look like all of these features they're putting out have a decent level of polish. Either way, I hope they start marking some of these features as major patch or expansion content so we can start playing this game within the next decade. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see on that. So overall, it doesn't look like Lost Ark is doing anything revolutionary. But like I've said in previous videos, it would be nice just to see a new title do things well. And from what we've seen so far, this title looks about as polished and feature-rich as anything we've seen in recent years. I'm personally most excited about the game having an action combat system that looks like it might actually involve some tactical thought, as well as the awesome looking cinematic experience that we're hopefully going to be seeing in dungeons. There are a few aspects of the game that make me a little nervous, such as point and click movement, but they're pretty minimal concerns compared to the features that I'm excited about, and I just really hope we end up seeing this title come to the West in the next few years. Anyway, that's enough from me. You've heard my thoughts on Lost Ark, and I look forward to hearing yours in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to my channel for regular content. You can expect weekly MMO and RPG videos, as well as regular live streams on both YouTube and Twitch. We also have an awesome little Discord community where we chat games every day, and you're very welcome to join us there. All links can be found in the description. Either way, take care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.